So come on everyone and follow me and my group. I just want to point out that as we go past Captain Walker's branded hand monument, this is one of the things that the cemetery is most well known for. And Captain Walker was branded with an SS for slave stealer, but for those of us that think of him as a hero, we call it slave savior. He was an abolitionist who retired to Norton Shores and then made his home here in Muskegon. This cemetery may seem old to you, but it was very new to us when it was formed in 1864. Our original cemetery was downtown Muskegon, on the corner of 1st and Muskegon, where the Mount Zion Church is now located. Our city was growing rapidly, so the cemetery was quickly getting full, plus we were a little concerned about burials being so close to our water supply and the sanitation. So Mayor Chauncey Davis donated this 10 acres in the middle of nowhere. It was actually just farmland and it was quite desolate. Nobody even wanted to travel out here to visit their beloved dead or even bury their loved ones out here. So a Lady Cemetery Association was formed, and they took to planting trees, planting flowers, putting in a fountain. They put in a well so that they could maintain the fountain and the plantings, and they even put up a fence. I don't see our beautiful fence anymore. I wonder what else has changed. Oh, hello, Mr. Torrent. How are you?
Very good.
I have brought some folks here to hear your story.
Good evening. My name is John Torrent. I was born in New York in 1833, moved to Grand Haven through Canada in 1854. There I was employed by Mr. Ferry, who owned a lumber mill and a machine shop. We built a saw for a mill in Muskegon, and it was my job to install the machinery. The boat ride on the lake was very rough and windy, and there were no piers back then. We could not get into the harbor and had to turn around. After having enough of that boat, I traveled overland up a trail, as there were no roads back then either. After finishing the job, old G. Mason offered me a position at that mill. 2 years later, I bought a mill in Grand Haven, moved the machinery here, and built my first lumber mill. I then bought and sold more land, lumber, and lumber mills than any of these so-called lumber barons in this town, including Muskegon's own Charles Hackley. After operating the mill for a few months, I was joined by my brother Yusto, and together we revolutionized the modern lumber industry. Torrent patents for lumbering equipment, 17 in total, were licensed to use all over the vast new lands and proved to be quite profitable. Also quite a risky business, as I see our striker friends have joined us tonight. Rebel rousers. Well, I'm glad you have visited us tonight, as it has given me a chance to see my hometown again. My, how the city has changed. In the height of the lumber era, the lakeshore was lined with sawmills, mostly mine. From the river to the channel, well, we even built mills on the north side. We would build the mill on pilings out in the lake to make it easier to float the logs to. Many mill owners would take sawdust and edgings and fill the land in between the lake and the mill to make more useful land. Why, I remember the water's edge being right up to the railroad tracks behind the depot, and right up behind the Amazon building. I see today we have made much more useful land. I'm good to see the depot is still here, Also, the Grand Trunk Freight Depot still here. And I'm glad to see the Century Club is still here. And my favorite downtown, my beloved Dream. I bought the site for my new house in haste, as I didn't want to see Mr. Hackley own the whole intersection. Then I built a house, bigger and 5 times more expensive than any of those shacks down the street. Too bad they had to use it for Mr. Hackley's library. Well, I thank you for visiting us tonight, our fair city of the dead, our beloved Muskegon. And I beg of you, my friends, please care for her. And I'd like to see her in another 100 years. Thank you. Enjoy your tour.
Alright, so you can follow me this way. I don't know if we get any introductions or anything, but my name is Clarence Zeilman. I'm the Boogie Woogie Bugler Boy of Company B. And that is actually a song that you can listen to. Alright, so if you'd like to follow me, we can go down this way. And so, I was actually grown up around here. Yeah, I went up to the Muskegon Big Reds, and I lived here for quite a while. And around my time, as living here, I thought, oh cool, I love music. And I like playing my instrument. So I figured after so long of playing it and being in school, I thought, well, why not go off to Chicago and check it out down there. And I went down there and did a little bit of what they call busking. It's where you go on the side of the streets and you start, well, playing your instrument here and there. But of course, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, because there's lots of people out there doing the same exact thing as me. And it made it really, really difficult to try to compete with everyone. And because of that reasons, I kind of stopped doing it, and I ended up with another band I found. And we went touring around the different areas.
Well, hello. Would you kindly gather around the Harkness plot, my husband's namesake? I'm grateful to have made it in time for sharing my story. I am Josephine Shepherd Harkness. My family moved here from Racine, Wisconsin to the Bear Lake area when I was just 2 years old. We often traveled by steamer and boat. So as a very young girl, I learned how to be outside and deal with the elements. I loved to camp, and I grew to love to just be outdoors in general. It was truly a wild wilderness when we first arrived, and we were some of the only people on Bear Lake, and we built this small pioneer-style cabin that we lived in. As I grew up, I had to do everything the boys did out of necessity. And I loved climbing trees and doing all those things that honestly make it really hard to do in your typical women's wear of the 1800s. My sign blew over. So, and obviously I had to do what the boys did anyways, men's boys work, because there was just a need for the help. And there was just too much work to be done, just plain and simple. I grew up fishing, picking fruit, gardening, and I spent a lot of time reading and exploring outside. The hardwood forests and marshes intrigued me, and I loved to be near and on the water for hours on end. My family often would take a farrier over Muskegon Lake from Bear Lake. We'd walk a ways, sometimes get a ride with a horse. I dreamed to get one of the velocipedes, a bicycle, and try myself to ride some of it. But we would take boats over to Muskegon to get goods and to attend church at Methodist. Even back then, when I first was married to John and we had our first daughter, Ellen, I knew in my bones that women were not equal to men in many, many ways in America. And I knew that was wrong. I knew from firsthand personal experience in my family. Gracie, she's right over here, Miss Gracie Kalmbach, one of my cousins. She had suffered horrible abuses by her husband and was granted a divorce in the early 1900s, which was unheard of. And after hearing and knowing her story and our family, it was heartbreaking to me. And I just felt more empowered to stand up for women's rights. The women's rights movement had started, and well, actually many shunned my Gracie after that, and she ended up moving on to Detroit so that she could do something different. Around 1848, a woman named Amelia Bloomer began writing. She started, was it the Seneca Falls paper, and she was doing a lot of writing for women's movement and women's justice. And when Amelia created the Bloomer, I wanted to claim it for a minute. Amelia created the Bloomer, and it was the way for women to just move about easier. They pretty much were getting rid of the petticoats, the corsets, all the cumbersome bulk, and it was so much easier to do everyday tasks. Growing up the way I did, I already knew that. And I often had worn a version of pants, you know, that the other boys around wore, so that I could get the task done also. I really did miss those freedoms later as I grew up, and I really got more involved in reading about women's movements and reading books like Little Women and the popular books that were out then. Later, Susan B. Anthony joined the cause, as well as many other women, famous women in that cause. And a lot of women began to let go of the bulk. And we saw outfits get more comfortable, stylish in a lot of ways, people thought. It was soon after 1 year, believe it or not, that Amelia Bloomer dropped the whole outfit, and so did a few others. But they did not pick up all the extra cumbersome outfit gear after that. It was interesting. So I lived until, here's my stone. Here's my stone head. I was born in 1846, and I lived until 1936. One other interesting thing outside of the Bloomer story is that Josephine Truly, during the Great Fire of 1874 that ruined, I think, 12 blocks of downtown, Josephine was there. She saw it happen. She was one of the few people who were honored and not losing their minds and panicking. And she had the wherewithal to stay at her home. She knew she'd be safe, I guess. And everyone and their brother loaded up her house with their belongings and went running in fear, to the point where they had to have a big project to reunite everyone with their stuff from my home. People even ditched their children out of fear. So that is the story of Josephine Baker, or Josephine Shepherd, Josephine Harkness. She is honestly, I'm Jamie Green, and she's honestly my third great-grandma.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our City of the Dead. My name is Nelson DeLong, and my claim to fame was that I was elected mayor for 2 terms in 1882 and 83 under the unusual circumstances that involved the 10 hours or no sawdust strike, the largest strike of the 1800s in the country. I grew up on a farm in Muskegon, and later went to the University of Michigan and obtained a law degree. At age 25, I moved to Muskegon, settled here, and established a well-respected and well-known law firm. 3 years later, I became the prosecuting attorney for the county of Muskegon. Then later, I was elected as mayor, as I said, for 2 one-year terms. I was on the side of labor, and I played a role in the largest strike in the country during the 1800s. As I approached my 50s, I had what I now believe was a brain stroke or a brain aneurysm. I collapsed while giving a speech, and shortly after that, I became destructive of things in my home, the furniture and such, and I had to be placed in the nearest padded cell, which was several counties away. So I was soon after that placed at the Traverse City State Hospital where in 1900, at the young age of 51, I passed away. Now, let me tell you what Muskegon was like in the 1880s. It was a raucous, pioneering town of 10 to 15,000, and it was full of lumberjacks, mill workers who cut the logs into boards, and boom operators who were the people who wrangled those logs down the river and also across Muskegon Lake to the proper sawmills. Now, according to historians, during this time, which was the peak of the lumber era here, there were more millionaires in Muskegon than any other town in the country. You might already have a pretty good idea of how the rich lived back then, but I doubt that many people today have a deep appreciation for how hard it was for the working class. Most of them were immigrants, recent immigrants. Many did not speak English. Most were unskilled, and the jobs that were offered were unskilled and had dangerous and grueling work. The cause of the strike, the 10 hours or no sawdust strike, however, was the hours they were required to work. The boom operators and the mill workers were required to work 11 or 11 and a half hours a day, 6 days a week. No sick time, no time off, and pretty much, no quality of life with that. So in 1881, I was involved with efforts to help organize the workers, and we had 2 rallies at the Liberty Pole, which was at Western and First Avenue, down by where the post office is now. And at the first rally on October 7th, 1881, 3,000 people showed up. At the next one, a week later, 4,000 showed up. Now, the Chronicle wrote this up and depicted me and my associate C.F. Cook as being a cynical opportunists who really didn't care about the workers. But we did, and we signed up 1,200 non-skilled workers into the union and also into the Workers' Party. And we formed a slate of candidates for mayor and all of the other positions in the city of Muskegon. Now, the Democrats and the Republicans were threatened by this, and they established a common slate of the best of the Republicans and Democrats to run against us, thinking that might give them a better chance. But we won 2 years in a row in landslides. The next serious improvement on that would be almost 50 years later with FDR's New Deal and the 40-hour work week. Thank you for coming tonight, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your tour.
Thank you.
Well, let's start with wages. The prevailing wage in this area for unskilled labor was $1.50 a day, yet we paid $1.75. We even agreed to up that to $2 per day, but you've got these strikers and these boom and pen workers all agitated about the possibility of a 10-hour day. Come on, let's talk about the length of the work day. The sorting of logs, what we call boom and pen work, must be done by the light of day and is therefore not suited for multiple shifts. We need an 11.5-hour day for the workers to clear these booms of the logs and make room for more logs coming in from upstream. Does the term log jam mean anything to you? Oh, there's some of the strikers you agitated right now. I should like to address them myself. Has it occurred to you, gentlemen, that Mr. DeLong here has taken up your cause solely for the purpose of furthering his own political career? And is it possible that he may be in the employ of or even invested in lumber mills in other parts of the state where they would love to see our lumber priced out of the market?
Graf, you scared to come all the way over here? Why don't you come all the way out here instead of go out to your crib?
Like offering some hospitality.
indeed I do. Well,
Good night, thank you.
welcome and good evening. It is wonderful to have you join us. My name is Nancy Jones, but you can call me Nan. I'm going to tell you about a scandalous part of Muskegon's history that I call Tales of the Canterbury House. You see, it was I who had the Canterbury House built back in the 1870s. And people wondered at the time how a mere woman could have designed and built such a sprawling entertainment center, shall we say. But all I will say about that is that I was no stranger to the business. Well, let me tell you about Canterbury House. It was a giant of a house. It had a big dance hall with high ceilings. You can keep coming along. We're just going to carry it on along here. Yes. So a big dance hall with high ceilings, a saloon, of course. It had a stage. It had an orchestra pit, and it had some 36 rooms on the second floor. Canterbury House was located on top of what was called Newaygo Hill, which is 2 blocks east of Getty Street at the site of what is now, I believe, Marquette Elementary School. So I do hope none of the ghosties from my era are still haunting that place, or those kiddies will be getting a real education. Well, the Canterbury House had a reputation far and wide among the lumbermen, the fishermen, the railroad workers, and the dock wallopers who came to the Canterbury House to spend their pay on drink, women, and gambling. Never heard of a dock walloper, you say? Well, those were the casual laborers who worked on the wharfs and the docks. But those honest laborers were not alone, since it was outside of the city limits at that time. There were no police raids. So so-called respectable businessmen and politicians also frequented the Canterbury House without any fear. So after the Canterbury was demolished in 1934, the Chronicle reported on its history, and here I will quote. Ask the middle-aged man or woman who has lived in Muskegon all his life about the sort of place Canterbury used to be, and most of them will tell you there never was, nor never has been, a place comparable to it. You get the idea that murder and mayhem was one of the advertised attractions, along with the dances, the booze, the dramatic productions, the women, and the cockfights. The place was no Sunday school. So let me pass you along to one of the managers of the Canterbury House, who has been described as a colorful lady of the evening. Miss Jenny ran Canterbury House after I sold it to John Williams. She can tell you a bit more of her story and continue the tales of the Canterbury House. Miss Jenny.
Thank you, Miss Jones. How do, folks? I'm Jenny Morgan, and I came to Muskegon from Holton. Of course, and that was after my ma died and my pa remarried. Me and the new missus didn't get along none too well together, so I lit out for the big city. And everybody knew where Muskegon was back then, because it boasted of more millionaires than any other town in this here United States. The timber them men were bringing down the river, well, it rebuilt the whole city of Chicago after the 1871 fire. Muskegon was a town where you could make your fortune, excepting that was only for the men. When I got to Muskegon, I found the jobs were scarce for the women. We were outnumbered. So many men had flooded into the area trying to line their pockets that they actually excluded us women from doing the jobs we'd been doing for a while, like clerking in the stores or cooking in the restaurants. the jobs that were left over for us to do, like sewing and laundry, well, they didn't even pay pen money. I'd had enough of living hand to mouth on the family farm, so I decided to go where the money was. That unique feminine trade that guarantees steady income. Some folks done call it the world's oldest profession. Now, I'm going to have you follow me for a wee bit here. You get ourselves out from underneath Miss Nan's feet. Speaking of feet, you best watch your own, because they call this here a road that we're on, but I tell you, I've seen more level land than a new plowed field. So watch your feet and come along. Where was I? Oh yeah, I made it to Muskegon. And Mr. John Williams owned the Canterbury House by then. He took a shine to me and made me a manager. I'd keep the regulars drinking and I'd dance with them. I learned to recognize the gentlemen from Muskegon when they came calling and how to keep them happy. I could deal out a hand of cards and still keep one eye on the staircase, making sure that only the paying customers went up them. And I found that I had a real nose for when trouble was brewing, and I knew how to take care of it. I was 25 years old back then, and I thought I'd seen everything. After all, I'd grown up with 6 brothers. But there came a night at the Canterbury House in September of 1875 that ended up being written about in the Muskegon Chronicle the following week under the heading, "It was a disgrace." The newspaper said, and I'm going to quote here, "Another innovation upon Muskegon morals occurred at a dance house across the lake last Saturday evening, whereas 40 men and women stripped off their clothes and danced in as nude a condition as the Aborigines of the forests." Lordy, I never thought I'd see that. I'm hoping I never see it again. I went that very night to one of our bartenders, Tom Stevens, and I accepted his proposal of marriage. I sent for my little sister Emma to go stand up for me, and exactly 3 weeks later from that date, Tom and I got hitched. We left Muskegon and went to Hillsdale County and make a living, doing farming of all things. I wish I could say it was a love match twixt Tom and me, but I have to admit that I chose him out of all my suitors there at the Canterbury House because, well, out of all the men that was in that saloon that fateful night, Tom was one of the few that managed to keep his clothes on. I hope you have another good night. Let's see how Miss Kitty Lee is doing. Miss Lee, you have company.
Well, hello.
You're my mic.
How is everyone? I sent my maid over here to check on Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker's been kind of grumpy lately because he overheard a conversation about someone changing the name of his beloved Armando. Gladys! Here I am. Did you give Mr. Walker flowers? Yes. Mr. Walker was only 27 years old when he became the sole owner of the Shaw Walker Company. He also went to the University of Michigan. Across the way, if you look, you'll see Mr. Hackley's burial chambers and his wife.
Yes, Mr. Hackley and Miss Lee, every night they have cocktails together. At least that's what they say.
Gladys, Mr. Hackley in life and here is a dear friend.
Right, Mom. My apologies. Why don't we take these people to your family plot?
Okay.
Let's go.
We'll show them the way.
That's right.
Is this where Captain Seth Lee is buried? Next to him, his first wife, Sarah. And next to her are her parents. We all seem to get along very splendidly.
Mr. Lee was the captain of his own boat by 1875. He was in business with Mr. Hackley. Quite a business partnership. Yes, it was. We worked. She wanted me to come work with her for a very long time, but it was too hot for my Norwegian blood. So she worked. And they often say that Mr. Lee was a good manager and a great businessman of that laundry, but the truth is, the missus was the one who ran the whole thing.
Yes, my husband passed away in 1900. I took over his duties, collecting the commissions, and I still received his pay, 80 cents a day, for 365 days a year. Sadly, I passed away in 1950. So here we are. Mr. Balburney, the undertaker at the time, said that I died from a stroke. And I was overworked and exhausted.
We're so tired, Mom. But at least Mr. Hackley left you $25,000 in his will. He also left Bub $2,000. And there was a note in the will that said if Bub would change his name from Charles Henry Hackley Lee to just Charles Henry Hackley, he would give him an extra $10,000. But we don't know if that ever happened. So if you could go and come back and let us know, I would really appreciate it. Oh, look who's coming, Mom.
Mr. McGordon.
Kitty Lee, how are you today?
Just wonderful.
Went up for a nice shot of brandy, if I do say so myself.
You're such a vile man, Mr. McGordon.
How was Mr. Hackley tonight?
I don't know how you got buried in holy ground.
Hello, my name is James McGordon. I was born in 1836, January 20th, in Aurora, New York. I was born to Anne and Andrew McGordon. I was the second oldest of 7 sons. In 1852, at the age of 16, I moved here to Muskegon. For a little while after, I married a Miss Angela Collins from Ireland. Well, her and I had 8 children of our own. 6 girls and 2 boys. The second youngest boy I named after my business partner, Mr. Charles Hackley. In 1857, I gained employment with H.J. Hackley and Sons and worked my way up from the bottom, gaining favor with its owners and its investors. After loaning them money, one of the investors that I loaned money to could not pay back his loan. So he granted me his quarter share in the H.J. Hackley and Sons company, in which Charles and I started our own company, Hackley and McGordon Lumber Company. We ran both the H.J. Hackley and Company and the Hackley McGordon Company at the same time. Doing the books, Charles did the books for both, while I took care of the manual labor and made sure that everything was running smooth. In 1874, Charles Hackley's father, Joseph Hackley, decided he would sell his share to myself and Charles of the H.J. Hackley and Sons. And the other investors did so as well. So we built a whole brand new mill. It was beautiful. And it burned. It was the same year that Charles Hackley's father died also. But after this had happened, we built another new mill and took on a new accountant, who you may know, Mr. Hume, Thomas Hume. But you didn't come here to hear about all our good times. I was Mr. Hackley's business partner. The paper and people would say I was a kind and friendly gentleman. That is until I started to drink to excess. There was one night where Porter Hackley and I, Charles's younger brother, were both drinking copious amounts of alcohol. and we began to brawl. And during that brawl, I cut Porter on the face very badly. I can assure you Mr. Hackley was not very happy about that. A second instance, I was walking down the street and was bothered by a man named Levi Beardsley. Well, I took him and threw him into a hearse. A third instance, I wouldn't say it was bad on my part, but a gentleman by the name of Alfred McColmer from Howard City came to our mill, demanding that we give him his money that he was owed. But what Mr. McColmer did not do was fulfill his end of the contract that we had, so we put upon a writ of garnishment on his land, which means we didn't have to pay him back, and by third-party investing, we could own it. So, Mr. McColmer followed Mr. Hackley to his house, and this discussion kept going. Mr. Hackley sent Porter, his brother, with a note to me to come see him at the house. As I arrived, well, a brawl began between Mr. McColmer and myself. He cut me in the leg, he cut me in the arm, in the chest, and on the face. And after doing so, after we had brawled a little more, he jumped out Hackley's front window to run away. Now, it's not the Hackley house that you know now. It was on Webster and 8th Street. Well, after he jumped out of the window, I ensued after him. But I had to stop due to the loss of blood. In the fourth instance that I will tell you of, I was accused of firing my pistol at a Mr. Pecos Kraus in public. Some people say I did, some people say I didn't. Either way it goes, firing your pistol in public with the intent to kill will get you arrested. So I was arrested, and Mr. Hackley and Porter posted my bail at $10,000. Now, in today's money, from what I hear, that would be $250,000 bail. Court proceedings were done, and during that time, I was in Grand Rapids at the Sweets Motel, and I had died there of a heart disease on December 6th, 1880. But I did leave a good sum of money to my family to be in good standing. Sorry to say, but this is the end of our tour. I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard tonight. We enjoy your presence, and we hope to see you again next year. If you have any questions or would like to be a part of this next year, please feel free to go up front and let them know. Just a reminder, this presentation is put on by people in the community. We get our donations from you and the tickets that we sell. Please feel free to thank our sponsors, the HUUC and the Offense. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.